What is up, everybody? I'm here with my twin today, Danny DeBull. Bro, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a long time we've been wanting to make this happen. And I know you're such an Omi guy, you're a collectible wizard. You've got a great YouTube channel yourself. So yeah, really excited to pick your brain today, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've also been wanting to link up with you for quite some time. I've been watching you, watching the moves you're making, and I think we're a little synergistic today. We got the same. This was not planned, all right? This is just natural. Shows where we're
Exactly.
at.
I totally agree, man. I think that's why I already knew this was going to be a good conversation. So, like you said, this was, we have some telepathic abilities here. Man, so thanks for coming on, man. One thing that you said to me, even before we just jumped on here was, Vivi is obviously in a bit of a tough spot right now. There's some criticism in the community. And I think there's obviously a lot of, optimism and positivity as well, but it's a bear market. Nobody really knows what's going. But one thing that you said was really interesting was like Vivi's kind of trying to understand the direction they want to take, right? Maybe you can kind of emphasize a little bit more on that.
Yeah, right. Prior to starting this up and jumping on, we were chatting, and I mentioned how it feels like to me like they kind of have an identity crisis, right? Like they're Web 2 and they're also Web 3. There is Vivi, the traditional business that's selling collectibles. It's very much grounded in like traditional business versus a crypto project like Omi. And they haven't quite yet been able to forge those two things together. Obviously, it's something that they're aiming to do, something that they've been building towards with OUP. But there seems to be a bit of an identity crisis in there. And part of the reason why I think that is because I think that they're a little scared of the regulatory environment and how the crypto side of things might impact their traditional, business, which is selling those digital collectibles for fiat.
Amazing. I haven't really heard somebody say that like you yet, and I think that's such a good point because even recently in the AMA, I noticed that it was like strictly about Vivi, and there was some concerns being like, "Hey, what about Omi? Like, how come there hasn't been that much discussion there?" And like you said, it's almost like they're trying to like, I don't know if packaging is the right word, but almost trying to separate the two in a sense where and I think the angle they've told me like that I've heard was that they're trying to appeal more to like the masses, so it's not like a crypto conversation, but at the same time like crypto is kind of the backbone driving the coin and potentially the economy. So any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that's also been like kind of a recent narrative in the community is how, Vivi's been at the forefront and Omi's kind of been on the back burner. And Queen Vivi even asked David you that question, why don't you ever talk about the Omi token anymore, right? It's just left to Reese. And, that's obviously intentional. Whether it's a strategy that they have, building out Vivi first, gearing towards those traditional fandom people, or it's something else to do with like the regulatory environment, wanting to put Omi in the back burner until all of that is sorted out and there's some clarity and they know how to proceed and then merge the two things together. But it's definitely something that I think something's definitely there. They used to talk more about both parts of the project together, right? And I think there's been a concerted effort over the last months to kind of like, separate them. Hopefully they bring them back together because a lot of people came here because of Omi. And, I had this conversation in his spaces with Ryan. I've talked about it with Kay on my channel recently. We think that more people are inclined to enter Vivi through Omi than through traditional, the collectibles industry. I even talked about this with Aaron, my collectibles on a live stream a couple weeks back.
Wow.
More people it's easier to onboard people from the crypto side into Vivi than it is to onboard normies. So I'm hoping that that's something that they recognize and that they move towards.
So that is so interesting because right now a lot of the sentiment is like, oh, the normies that are the masses and that's the people we want to appeal to. But like you said, the people that would be kind of the low hanging fruit are already the crypto people, the people that are already here. And it's like, how do we kind of get them more on board first before getting into the person that knows nothing about it. And I think, one thing that I would argue too, and you said this as well, is like the majority of users are probably crypto based, that came here from the coin and then got interested in the collectibles. Because everybody I talk to, I'm like, well, when did you find Vivi? It's like, oh, well, I put money in the coin and then I noticed the collectibles, right? So that's interesting.
How do people like? Do you talk to a lot of people? I'm sure about Vivi. How do normies take it when you talk to them about?
It's usually like major skepticism because of the price points. So they're like, "Oh, why is that? Why did that Spider-Man hit 100,000 and now it's 6,000? Like that doesn't seem safe. Like that's the kind of, or how did that become 12 grand? And it's just a picture. Like I don't really understand how that's gonna provide me anything. Like I could buy a video game console for $1,000, get 2 PS5 games. And I'm like, yeah, but then I go on to explain them. But it's a pretty steep learning curve for most people, as I find the crypto people that are already in it get it. Like there's not much to talk about, you know?
Yeah. And one of my, I guess, fears is that concerns is that they're alienating that population by
Mhm.
focusing heavy on normies. I think they'll alienate and then kind of miss out on like that low hanging fruit, like you said. I think that it was positive that they started that advertising campaign, the marketing to Coin Market Cap, right? Was
Mhm.
the publication, one of the publications. Um, but I do think they need to those lines. They did that for the Lamborghini drop.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. I think that's the issue that a lot of people are kind of seeing too, is there was a lot of other priorities like the MCP and those kind of things before. I think branding seemed to be the priority from the public at least. And so I think when it, came out and there was this new like collectors at heart, a lot of these crypto guys that are spending like big money are like, well, I've been flipping, or I haven't really been getting much for holding all
Yeah,
these sets. So like, it doesn't really appeal to me. Um, and so like I get like the branding push and like where they're going with it, and maybe that's more in line with their big brand partners like Disney. But I think there was like a lot of hesitation from the community.
yeah, and I'm fine with the marketing also, and that's a long term vision and package that they're putting together. But I do think they can chew gum and walk at the same time, right? And
Mhm.
build out that long term vision, trying to build out a long term community of different fandoms, but at the same time, really honing in on the the people that got them to kind of where they are now, and the base that I think is easiest to build on. In the next at least a couple of years, because it's going to be a long time, I think, until you get the normies involved. This is going to have to
Yeah.
be it's going to have to become more part of like everyday life. You're going to have to get those big companies like Amazon and eBay involved and kind of grow the whole pie. And then Vivi's piece of the pie will grow along with it. But, Vivi's kind of like a little speck, and they're not going to cause a seismic shift in human behavior, right? On their own. It's going to have to come as, part of the whole industry kind of moving in that direction. So I think they should have that long-term plan and that short-term plan. And maybe they do, I just haven't really seen evidence of that crypto aspect.
Man, so well said again. I totally agree. Like you said, it's kind of like you need some massive tectonic plates to shift before people are going to wake up and be like, oh, AR is cool. And oh,
Yeah.
NFTs are actually have utility and use case. And so like, you're right on that, man. I think that's the part that's difficult right now, is there's a lot of people that are kind of expecting this to happen next week. And it
Yeah.
does take a long time. But at the same time, we have how many active users? Not that many. Like like I
Right.
saw, I don't know how accurate some of these statistics that are coming on Twitter, but like sometimes some of these respected community members are like, there's only 3,800 active wallets this month, and it's like,
Yeah.
man, that's a pretty small base that you have to keep consistently engaged. Like if it was me, I'd be like, as much as I see the big long-term vision, like I'd be honing in on that small core user base that's spending money every week and being like, okay, how do we cater best to you guys
Yeah.
to ensure that we can continue the sustainability, right?
Yeah. And even if you have those 3,800, I don't know if that's daily active users, then you've got like your monthly active users, and then you
Right.
have people who just have wallets who are kind of watching on the sidelines. And so how do you bring those people back in that have been pushed to the fringes for whatever reason, bear market,
Yeah.
waiting things out, not satisfied, kind of tight on money. There are a number of reasons why people get pushed to the sidelines in an environment like this, right? But getting back to like the whole argument of onboarding normies, the whole what is Vivi and what makes the collectible so special is like the blockchain, right? It's ownership over digital assets, and that's very much crypto, right? Normies don't get it.
Right.
Many don't care to get it. It's a there's a marketplace. It's for buying and selling. Right now, all you can really do is take pictures using augmented reality. But like you said, you can do that on Snapchat. You can play with these characters in Fortnite.
Right.
So until you have a well-developed Viviverse and there are actually things to do that entice people, normies, to do something, I don't think that you'll get them onboarded, because right now all you've got is that whole blockchain narrative.
Wow. It's so true, man. I did that interview with Vivi Magic, and like you said, the exact same thing we came to is like, why would I buy a Darth Vader for 500 US when I could see Darth Vader in augmented reality whenever I wanted to, let's just say. And like
Yeah.
you said, it's that concept of digital ownership. That's the real piece that's going to drive people. And then on top of that, like having like app engagement, because like you said, if these people, even if you're not really interested in Vivi, like if there was different things you can do within the app to keep you more engaged, then potentially we have a higher user base already. I know MCP should really drive some things forward, but I think that's it. Like I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like how is that appeasing or appealing to more people that like you own this compared to you not owning it, if you get like the same kind of use case from it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I
yeah,
definitely think that MCP is a step in that right direction, because that kind of gamifies the whole app.
right.
It's something that people have really been looking forward to. Part of the reason why I think people have been pushed to the fringe, because they haven't gotten it yet.
Mhm.
But there are things in play that will get us to where we're going, I think.
Right. And I guess for some of the people that still, including myself, that still don't have a good understanding of like OUP, like what are like some of the main benefits that I guess like you'll get from this? Like I know I've heard like, you get a potentially higher allocation to different drops. You can maybe guarantee up to 2 drops a year. I forget, it's like a bronze ticket, but like what are some other, like why do I want a lot of OME, if that makes
Yeah.
sense?
So that's like the staking component of OUP, which is something that I'll definitely look to do. And I haven't read through it in a little while, but so I can't cite specific
Yeah.
information. But it's as exactly like you said. If you stake a certain amount of OMI, you are guaranteed, to get. I think it's VV licensed drops, secret, like a whole set, like secret rare,
Wow.
ultra rare, etc. Once a year. You're guaranteed a gold ticket, and that gold ticket is good for a certain amount of time, but pretty much guarantees you a big drop, right? So if like
Mhm.
a Charizard came out during a specific time period and you had a gold ticket, a certain amount of the drops are going to be allocated to gold ticket holders, right? So
Wow.
you've got a great chance of landing those drops. So it kind of gives you access to these highly sought after drops. Then there are other perks also, but
Really,
that's
yeah. I mean, and that's great. I think that's a perfect overview. And I think this is where, a lot of people that I talk to, my friends are like, man, what are they going to have left for MCP? Because, we've already got a lot of the grails, right? Like we look at even like top 10 superheroes. I think we've got like 6 of them. Like a lot of the big Disney
yeah,
characters are here. And so, there's still Hulk #1. I mean, we could still get into like a ton of other things happening, Wolverine, FA, etc. But I think that's the other piece is like people are really like hoping this gets pushed out. And recently when it did in the beta, like people that were like, had huge collections were, should have been a top 10 whale were like pushed to like, rank number 56, and it said
yeah.
starter. So I think there's still a
Dr.
lot of
Profit
work.
was a starter.
Yeah. And he's the #1 wallet, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. And are you kind of shifting your strategy now for MCP? Like, are you going after like cheaper things and like going after sets?
I've actually shifted my strategy more towards crypto.
Mm,
And I came here through OMI. I'm more of in terms of investments, I
yeah.
view crypto and OMI more traditional. That's not traditional. That's an alternative, but still, I view that sort of asset as a better play long term. And so my goal during this bear market has been to accumulate as much as I can, not just OMI, like Ethereum, a bunch of
Yeah.
altcoins, Bitcoin, Tesla stock, whatever it is I'm investing in. I just want to capitalize on this moment in time and the opportunity I have. So I actually sold off some of my collectibles in order to, add to those bags, looking to getting back into the collectibles arena, once prices start coming up, and just play that off of each other. But that's an interesting thing that they did, and they talked about creating synergy between MCP and OUP, so one doesn't necessarily overpower the other, and they complement each other, and they're
Right.
rewarding both the collectors and the investors. So I don't necessarily feel an urgency to rack up my MCP points, because I know I can stake my OMI. If I, when I get to a certain amount, I can possibly get to that top tier, and that will satisfy that.
Right. Really smart, man. I think that's a lot of people are in the same boat as you. And like, there's so much, opportunities to be made right now in crypto. And I mean, even for me, like just seeing some of the coins that I was in, like at their all-time high and seeing where they are now, it's just insane to consider that they could even go back to the all-time high and seeing where the price point is. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to try to, go crazy now in the bear market. That's what
Yeah.
people mistake. And they chill out in the bear market and then come back in the bull cycle, when you need to be doing the inverse of that, chilling out
Yeah.
in the bull cycle.
Psychology.
Right?
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
people get shaken out when sentiment is low, but that's when it's really, like you said, that's the time to dig in, see what you want, and and execute your plan for those long-term gains.
Right. Because OMI receded like how much? You like from I think I got in at 0.0027. I think that might have been Canadian though, but I forget. I sold a lot off at like 0.16.
Mm.
Just under 2 pennies. Yeah.
Just
And
under 2
2 cents.
cents.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that was like the high, like pretty much the all-time high.
So wait, the all-time high back when it first spiked?
Yeah, when it first spiked. Because I got
Oh,
in
wow.
yeah, so I was in like early March. Even before that, it would have been February. I put in
Damn.
like 5 grand, and it was funny because everything else was pumping, and I was like just sitting on it. I'm like, I think it's gonna have its day, and I just waited on it. And then within like 2 to 3 weeks, it did a 6x to about 30,000. And then that's when I started utilizing a lot of that stuff for the NFTs, which,
Nice.
yeah, and but it's just crazy because like that was pretty much the biggest rise it ever had, and it slowly kind of declined from there, right?
Yeah, it didn't get back to that. It was that,
Yeah.
big pump, it dumped. And then it moved back up to 008, but it
Right.
never broke a penny again.
Yeah. And it was crazy though, because we even went to a period where it was like, I think like, 1/10 of a penny or something. And then it went back, like you said, to the 0.08. So, it's going up and down. So it's like you said, and especially with this being a metaverse token in the future or coin, like I really feel there's like some pretty big potential. And especially if we have tangible products like the Viviverse, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. Like the narrative is there, and so much of crypto is narrative based, right? Like things
Yeah.
move based strictly off narrative. It's not like the stock market where they have all these formulas, and they analyze the debt, and the estimated revenue and profits and all that. In crypto, it's like narrative driven, hype cycles, and OMI is, in my mind, kind of perfectly positioned to capitalize on the narrative of NFTs tied to the biggest licenses in the world, right? All these pop culture behemoths,
Right.
a metaverse play, someone like Alcon being involved in it. It's got that strong narrative that can really drive it. And there are more, you said that there were something like 3,800 daily active users. If you go to
Yeah.
like monthly active users, it's like whatever it is, 10, 20,000, but that's way more than what's going on in Decentraland. You know what I'm saying?
Good point. It's all relative right now. Like it's pretty much like when these were all titans. If you looked at the relative proportions of people involved at that
Yeah.
point, it'd probably be the similar kind of breakdown. And now that we're in a bear, it's probably the same amount that are kind of left hanging out. And a lot of people probably just are like aren't really buying or can't really afford to, right? I mean, a lot of the people that are accumulating are like big whales that I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And they tell me this is why normies don't make it, is because right now they close down and shutter in and don't take that second job or like be a little risky. And they're out there stacking, you know.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And
Yeah.
I took on an after school. I'm an assistant principal.
Oh,
You know,
amazing. Wow.
yeah. So I'm trying to like, work some extra
Mhm.
hours, jump in on extra projects or whatever in order to, add to my salary in order to deploy extra capital. And I'm
Yeah.
telling my wife, you can't buy that dress. You know what I'm saying? Like, she
Yeah.
hates it. She's waiting for this bear market to end.
Good for you, man. Yeah, I'm trying to. I was bartending a lot, but you know what? It was just too much stress between this, my real job, and then Vivi and stuff. So I was like, you know what? I think I did okay, but it's difficult, right? It's difficult when like the chips are down to have the balls and the confidence to be like, all right, I'm gonna like
Yeah.
actually do the opposite of like, even I've got good friends that were like super intelligent, super bullish, that have like been like, no, I'm done. Like they've, promised us too many things. They've under delivered. Like I'm waiting for the next cycle to sell things off. I'm not going to invest any more money. And I'm like, damn, like I just hate to hear that. And then contrasting to that, I talk to other people that are like so bullish and being like, wow, I got all this time now to accumulate before like friggin' we enter Disney's metaverse. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
You need conviction. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had people over my house the other day for my son's birthday, and my brother was shitting on me. He does it all the time, asking me how my crypto's doing. What are your bags at? Um, I just told him to wait. Ask me that same question in a year or two, and we'll have the same discussion.
Exactly. And nobody wants to see the other person do well. They want you to pull
Yeah.
out. They were like, pull it out. It's not why. And then when you do a 10x, they don't say anything to you. You know what I'm
Well, they
trying
want to buy on the pump.
to Right. They want you to be like, okay, now it's time to buy. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's funny, man. I had this conversation actually with somebody the other day. I was like, what are the chances that Disney gives Vivi their best IP ever, right? First appearances of Mickey Mouse, Oswald, Elsa, Walt Disney, you name it, right? At the same time, we're aware that they were building their own metaverse and off their best NFTs to Vivi. And then I was like thinking, okay, like there's got to be some kind of like long-term connection, because one, if there wasn't, they would be releasing the second appearances, and a lot of these people would be like, hey, wait a second, we already have these. The other piece to that is a lot of people would be like, oh, well, if let's say they did abandon Vivi hypothetically, people would be pissed off, being like, you just killed off your most loyal fan base. And then on top of that, they'd be like, oh, we saw a project that was doing so well completely crash, and now you want to launch more NFTs when these things are all down in value. It would be a total deterrent. So I'm like, there's got to be something there with like, and I'm not just saying Disney, but I'm just saying like it because it's an easy example,
Yeah.
that there's like a connection, right?
You think there's a master plan?
I think so. I just don't think it makes any sense not to. Like Disney are so calculated. I don't know if like it would be hard to think that it was like an afterthought, being like, oh, we gave these NFTs and now people are saying these are the best ever. Like, you know what I'm trying to say? I'm presuming
Yeah.
they would consult somebody very, high end in the crypto or NFT space, multiple people to give some insight as to what that might look like, right?
Yeah. I've thought about it.
Yeah,
I don't know what the answer is. On the one hand, like what you're saying makes absolutely perfect sense, right? How do you enter this new space and offer your best IP
right,
without having that long-term plan? But then maybe they just don't understand the space. Or maybe I feel like, Disney is such a big corporation and there are so many parts to it. I don't necessarily know that all those parts talk to each other.
right.
And so maybe, the person in charge of, that part licensing out their IP didn't, consult with the long-term plan or didn't really understand it. Because it's also odd that Disney never really talks about Vivi.
Right. It was
Right.
just a golden moments week, right? That they,
Right.
yeah. And that's where you go to Quid and you're like, well, they've, it's almost like an iteration, right? They gave Quid these like all their Disney stuff, but they couldn't mint it. And then they go to Vivi and they're like, we'll give you more Disney stuff and you can mint it. And maybe their metaverse is like, here's all the Disney stuff, you can mint it and it's cold storage. You know what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say?
But when they went to Quid, they went to Quid first, right? Quid was doing
I
it
don't
first.
I don't know enough to like guarantee that, but I think so. I think Quid had a lot of that stuff first. Yeah. Like the
Yeah. So,
digital stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So, Quid kind of like got in a little later, I think, to that whole NFT side of it. They were
Right.
strictly digital collectibles. Then maybe then Vivi came along, um, taking it to that next level. But I'm not really convinced that Disney really has a long-term plan with the Vivi stuff.
Mm.
But it would make like ultimately it would make sense for them to, right? Like you said.
And even if it was an afterthought, if thinking it from like a PR perspective, and not only that, also just like being like, if you think about it, if there's all these Disney NFTs are out there, and the most loyal people, the people that want in first, are here, then like if you screw these people over and then try to do it again, even if you have a mass marketing strategy, I feel like there'd be so many people upset that it
Yeah.
would like almost potentially ruin the potential for that second thing to go off. But I could be wrong because I have a friend that also says, really smart guy, that was saying, Disney likes to test things out first. They don't want to like dive in right away because they're such a massive company that they're like doing these things in small pockets, analyzing it, seeing how it works, and then kind of similar how they did to Netflix, he says. And then once they kind of like have found the product, then they're like, okay, let's launch it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's that component too.
It's possible, and especially looking to develop their own metaverse if they just have their own stuff, in the metaverse, in their metaverse, and their metaverse is attractive to, the Disney fandom. It's going to be interesting to watch this whole space evolve to see, because we all say, FA on the blockchain is like the most important thing.
Right.
It's going to be interesting to see, well, is it, years down the line? And, Gary Vee talked about that also. He talked about, well, it might not be first on the blockchain. It might be first on the Ethereum blockchain or
Yeah.
whatever chain wins out. So I don't, it's really hard to understand it. But, to me, first appearance is significant.
Yeah, so this is where the conversation gets really interesting because I agree with you. So, if I look back at, for instance, like the whole thing that's going on with GoChain right now, to me, there's no kind of confirmation about what it all means. And so, that alone, I'm like, if let's just say like those technically weren't minted on GoChain first, there's no historical record, then like DC at that point with those floppy disks will kind of claim the first appearance of Batman, which were done in like these crazy numbers, right? I think they were like minted out so many of them. And so that's a little bit concerning. And then I think, when IMX came in, I was like, okay, big blockchain, Ethereum, here's immutable kind of resting on top of it, kind of showing that significance. But my buddies also say this. They're like, well, wait a second, what if this is just like first on chain, not first appearance? Because first appearance is like the real life character that like got made up and created, and now it's just another medium, which happens to be blockchain that they're released on. It's still going to hold weight, but maybe not the same that we think. And then, like you said, if Cardano wins the day, or Zilliqa, or another huge, and then all of a sudden they do it there, or Solana, or whatever, then now we're going to be playing that game, right? So it's like
Yeah.
there's still too many. It's so early, bro.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, what if that's correct? Let's say the Todd is, as blasphemous as it may seem, if
Yeah.
Todd's not first Batman, and what was it? What was it? HRO?
I think
No,
it
the
was. Oh,
the
it's like I
floppy
forget exact palm. I think it was.
Palm.
Yeah,
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 those floppy disks. What if that Batman is the first? If somehow that's determined to be the first, do you think anyone would care about those? Or is it the one on Vivi being the first? Is
right.
another, it's like a layer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point. I think it's again, there's like there's some things right now, like, as an example, on Hero, on HRO, that are the first, like appearance of, I think, Flash as an example, like in a
Yeah.
card format. And it's kind of like, I think there's obviously like a certain amount of collectors that are really into it, but it's like, wait a second, how come that doesn't hold more weight? Or if we then make it now Hulk, we talk about Hulk. Well, the first time Hulk came out technically on Vivi was in a crappy comic that's worth literally $2 right now, but that's
Yeah.
technically the first appearance on chain of Hulk, despite it not having in real life comparison, right?
Right. Not the
So
FA real world on chain.
you got it.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like you want to go to like, not to flood any other things, but if you look at like even like Darth Vader came out and like that Star Wars #1 comic that dropped on Vivi, right? And then the collectible format came out later, but it's like, well, technically, if you want to be very, um, you know, technical about it, then you would say that that's actually the first time that Vader appeared on the blockchain, even though it's a comic, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're looking at the data would show true that, right?
Yeah. Even like Lamborghini, right? There was a Lamborghini drop, I think,
Exactly.
and there's a Wonder Woman drop off of
Right.
right not on VV. So it's going to be interesting. My thoughts are that it's going to have, I think that the brand that it drops on is going to matter. You know what I mean? The project, like the VV
Right.
attachment, people are going to look for first on. If VV becomes a thing and like, it becomes bigger and they execute on that vision, then I think that, first on VV will matter. Kind of like how there's Tops, there's Donruss and like baseball cards, Upper Deck,
Good
whatever it
point.
is. Tops is, the tried and true legacy card company. And I think that that same kind of thing might emerge, a parallel.
That's brilliant. I think that you hit it perfectly, because it's kind of like even like an action figure. If it's like a no name brand that did it, but if it's like Mattel or something, you'd be like, oh, okay, well, this is like, it's a big deal and it's
Yeah.
successful. So, Vivi's success, I guess, is really critical, right? To ensure that these do have the
Yeah.
same kind of impact. Um, and it's kind of like a mixed crowd right now, right? It's difficult to see the people that bought in at the high. Like I remember one of my brother's friends, you know, literally took out 50K and was buying things at like the high in January.
January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the excitement's there. And at the
Yeah.
same time, like, Bored Apes were going for like a mil
Yeah.
plus. So
It wasn't just in Vivi.
exactly, right. And I think everybody was just trying to catch up. And when really the answer was to sell and wait.
That's
Um,
a sell signal.
yeah,
Like now moving forward, once you get experience in the space, now you know that like, when your friend's friend is loading up, who's never heard of it, that's a sell signal.
exactly. And it was interesting because a lot of the perspective from people that I knew was like, well, I don't want to sell it because I'm building I'm building a big reputation within VV with it. Like, because I have that secret rare Spider-Man at the time, and which was like 100K plus, or the Marvel Comics #1, like I'm
Yeah.
getting a lot of followers, a lot of respect. And then but it's difficult to just be like, got to break the mold and just sell it. And
You get
and
shitted on. You get shitted on, man. If you're
you
selling what
do.
everyone's buying,
Yeah,
it's going to a million,
exactly.
right?
And I guess as influencers, right, you and I, like, you also got to be careful, right? Because you can't be like, talking about a certain NFT and then be like, all right, let me sell that NFT.
Yeah.
So
It's another layer.
it's another layer to it. So there's a lot to be said, man. I mean, I'm still really bullish about it. I think that uh that despite kind of, a lot of the FUD currently, and despite the not necessarily knowing the exact direction it's going to take, I'm just like, it makes way too much sense to not collect these things. And for me, it's like too big of a risk to like not buy things at such a low price point. So I'm like, even if I lose another 60% of the value, I'm like, I've seen where they could go, that I'm like, this, not that I would like it, but the only issue, man, is like a kind of a slow puncture wound right now. Like, we've hit the bottom, things are still bleeding a little bit. Like, there's not really a stability anymore. It's just kind of a slow puncture wound.
Yeah, a little bleeding out still.
Yeah.
But now is actually a less risky time to buy. And that whole speaks to the whole psychology of it, right? So it feels good buying when the prices are going up. Doesn't feel good buying now. But if you have conviction and you think that this is going somewhere, it's actually less risky to buy now when the prices have been depressed so much.
Man, that is so well said, because it's true. I mean, if you're buying at 100K and now like it's down to 6K,
Yeah.
then if you buy at 6K, like even if it goes down to 2, it's still way less risky. So yeah,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, from that 100K, you're risking, a drop of $95,000. You know what I mean?
yeah,
If this cuts in half, if he's 6K cuts in half, even if it drops 60% or whatever, it's $4,000.
yeah.
So the risk reward has shifted more in, collectors or investors' favor. But now it's a matter of conviction. how much do you believe in these? Do you want to like, are you a collector or an investor? Do you want to allocate capital here,
Mhm.
and have the fundamentals changed for you? And I think a lot of people are questioning that right now. Have the fundamentals changed? I think that they held the team in very high regard. Not that they don't anymore, but there's more frustration now because
Yeah.
of the lack of execution, right? So, everyone's got to make their own determination on the fundamentals of this project and, whether or not the team will be able to execute.
It's a good point. And I think, one of the core issues that I see is that, like, most people on this app, to me, whether they wanna admit it or not, are investors. Like,
Yeah.
they're looking to make money. Literally everybody that I talk to. There's the odd person that's like, "I don't care what price it goes to, I really wanted this," but at the same time, if you're buying something and it's doing a 50% reduction in 3 weeks, it's upsetting.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's where, like, the collectors at heart thing, is interesting because I know, like, where they wanna go, but I'm also like, the people that are here, wanna be able to see sustainable kind of, trajectory in what they've invested, and a lot of these guys and girls are big investors. Like, they really kinda see this stuff really going big time, like renting, burning, they're in it to win it long term, and I think they're kind of a little bit hesitant right now just because, like you said, they're not seeing that execution,
Yeah.
to the point that they think it should be at.
Yeah. Even someone like my collectibles, who's like a super collector. He's been in this business. He's also looking at this from, a collector's perspective, but also how can I make money to support my collecting?
Right.
Um, and the whole collectors at heart thing also speaks to the identity crisis of investment app versus collectors app, because we can say as much as we want, this is for collectors, but when you have a secondary market built in, it's inherently an investment, right?
Yeah.
It is inherently when you manufacture scarcity, you're doing so to create value. So
Mm,
but there is that gray area, and there is that collecting aspect to it, and and you do find yourself wanting to pick up things that nostalgic about. So it's there also, and I think long term that would be the ultimate goal, right? Like, I collect baseball cards, and I will collect players that I like, or vintage cards that I like, and if the value dropped, I wouldn't really care,
mm.
right? But I also sold them off, in order to buy crypto. So there's that collector's aspect of it, but also investing, and I think it's in every, I guess, in like any type of industry that's similar.
So that's really interesting that you say that because I have the same, uh, kind of outlook on some of the physical collectibles that I own. Like, I don't really care if they go
Yeah.
down,
You care
truthfully.
less, right? If
I
those go
care.
down.
Yeah, it depends on, it's pretty much
Or
how much I pay. Like, if I pay a significant amount for something and it's, like, graded, like, I'm doing that purposely. But if I'm just buying, like, a comic book for $7, like, I could
yeah,
rip it in half. And, maybe that's what Vivi's saying too, is like, "Hey, we have $7 comic books like that Darth Maul that came out, number 1.
yeah,
Super cool variant for, 225 total copies." And I was even thinking, what if they burn some of them because nobody's buying it? Then you're just like 37 in existence. If I went to my comic book store and like, hey, there's 37 of these, it's $75. I'd be like, yeah, that sounds great. But I'm still doing it. I'm only buying it if I think it's actually worth what its price point is. That's
yeah,
what's going on, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So
And
it's
maybe that's also because it's so like new and nascent, right? Like,
mhm,
comics have been here forever, since they predate us.
right.
Baseball cards predate us. And so they have that strong foundation. Vivi is brand new in a brand new sector. And so
Mhm.
over time, maybe you get that, those people who just buy, and they don't care any about the price at all. They're collectors at heart, right? But I
Yeah.
think I think it will likely take decades. Because think about like Pokemon cards, right?
Yeah.
When did people just well, I guess people collected Pokemon cards first before they were really financially motivated, right? But they were gamified.
Yeah, I would argue like you said, man, like most people didn't at the point. Like I think there
Yeah,
was probably a few really kind of niche people that were like, yeah, I think this might be worth something long term, especially people that came from that baseball background or sports cards. But you're right. For the most part, it was like an afterthought, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's all interesting.
It really is. Like, cause this is where like I'm starting to get confused because like the one thing I keep saying is I think it goes where you're like in an office and you're in a meeting with somebody and you're displaying your like digital collectibles behind you. They're rotating, they're animated, they're doing things that you can't even imagine now. Maybe it starts off AR, then it's VR, then it's freaking holograms. And it's like that's the kind of thing to me that's gonna have this crazy to be like, wow, there's only 600 Marvel #1s in the world. Like that's
Yeah.
the significance of this is insane. But like we're so many steps behind and there's so many hurdles to overcome where that's not even like you can't even imagine that right now because the reality to get there is so there's just too many things to do, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Years away, but the potential is there, and that's like why
Yeah.
people love this project so much is because of the different licenses that they have. Like you said, first on blockchain,
Mhm.
and so the potential is really there if things play out the way people expect them to. And again, it's all about community. Also, there's also that aspect of
True.
it. You know,
True, and I mean, and that's where Vivi and Omi tend to do really well because we do have a really loyal, strong fan base here of some pretty serious people that are whether they're drinking the Kool-Aid or not, they see something that a lot of people don't, which is good. And I think one thing they keep reiterating to me too is like, man, wait till crypto to gem comes in, and vice versa though, gem to crypto. And then like they would say I would be moving a lot of money. Like a lot of people tell me that, including myself. Like on a credit card, things are expensive. And I'm like, man, if I just had the opportunity to move some ETH in here, like, knowing that Walt is under 2 ETH right now, as an example, like that
yeah,
is pretty wild when you think about it from ETH. But in
yeah.
dollars and credit cards, it's a whole different story.
Especially when the price of ETH runs up and people are holding on a big bag, and now these look cheap, and they play the two against each other.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And it has that arbitrage effect or whatever it is. Um,
Hmm.
it's definitely another layer. So it's exciting to think about for sure.
It is. And like playing the market, like you said, jumping on the action. And we may actually have a lot more people. I know this is going to sound bad, but like jumping in the app from crypto to gem, even if they don't really believe in Vivi, but because
Yeah.
they know some scarce popular collectibles dropping, they're like, oh, I'll throw 6 ETH on the floor, let it rise, cash it out, go back in, go back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially if the
So,
market picks up, right? Because those green candles
yeah.
create more green candles, and it becomes like, things move. It's
Yeah.
cyclical.
It is, man. And I do really miss the trading aspect. I've been saying that. And just some of the market action is really where I think a lot of people were engaged because it was a money making opportunity. Now, for me, it's like so difficult to flip something. Like if I find a good mint, as an example, like I might have to sit on it like 2 weeks to even make a small profit, as before you could flip it almost instantaneously. And one thing that I hate is that like they took that away from like the most recent listings for every collectible. Remember they used to just have like a running log of like everything that came like somebody listed.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense that they don't have it because there's so many more NFTs now that are probably just like the app would friggin' go on fire. But that's the thing, like, and it seems like almost purposeful, right? Because it seems like they're going with that collectors at heart narrative, but potentially the market's not there yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're like, we said earlier, I think that their best bet and way to grow this thing is through the crypto
Yeah.
people, and big prices on some of these collectibles will be good for the whole app. And I think Alex had the same thing, right? I think you asked that question the other day.
Yeah.
Do we want to see these prices go up? Is that good? Like to get them like, pumping or whatever. And Alex said he thinks that it would be good. And that's what was onboarding all these new people during, the hype cycle in January. You can look at just like your own YouTube growth, right? You were getting, I'm
Yeah.
sure, growing exponentially because you had all these people flooding in because they wanted to be part of something,
Right.
right? And that's what, and again, we're in a bear market, and there's plenty of good taken like the fact that they've done like $1 million in gem sales in the last week, still in a bear market. I don't know of any other, there's still, but
Mhm.
like the Lambo still creates that hype, and that you get, you get reminded of what's special about the app. You know what I mean? When everyone gets so excited and they're posting their green trucks on Twitter,
Right.
that's a reminder of the way things used to be, right? Every day,
Exactly.
every drop,
Right, all the time, like,
all the time.
constant. Yeah, and I think, like, man, even in that, I remember I bought one of those SR Lambos, and I got, like, just under 600 likes on it, right? And I was like, "Damn," like, you said, this reminds me of old times. But, like, yeah, it's been, like, crickets now, man. I mean, like, you and I back in, like, November, I'd say to, like, March, you put out one video, you get, like, 50 to 80 subs.
Yeah,
It'd be easy. Now I'm like, I'm lucky if I don't lose subs actually on when I post a video. I've
yeah,
already lost a ton of followers. Just
yeah,
continue to make content, right? Because I think people go, "Oh yeah, Vivi's." I'm pissed off about that. Unsubscribe.
yeah. And they do have to work towards regaining trust. So part of it is like bear market, right? And that's natural,
Yeah.
ups and downs, cycles. What they need to work on is just rebuilding some trust with people, and executing on their game plan, not over promising and under delivering. Learn from some of their previous mistakes. You know what I mean? Because now you have people who are some kind of questioning the fundamentals. And recent sentiment has been kind of down.
Yeah, and I feel like they're almost, like, too confident. It's almost like the Tom Brady, you won every Super Bowl, that's how Vivi feels. It's like, "Well, we got all the best IP, so we know once we drop Lambo, you're all coming back despite what you want, because there's gonna be a potential 20x gain."
Yeah,
So, like, that's why it's almost like there's too much confidence, and
yeah,
then you see these small NFT projects, or smaller rather, like a kid called Beast, that's offering insane amount of utility week to week, and it's, like, having an exceptionally elaborate roadmap and a whole plan that's like locked up for the next 2 years, and whatever, cash they allocated, they're using it for it. So it's like, because they know that's their way to survive and to create wealth and to create excitement. And they know that if they didn't do that, it would be like a crash and burn. And so Vivi like has this saving grace of like IP, because it's like, oh, people are pissed off, we'll just drop Mario, or we'll just drop,
yeah.
Hulk #1, and then it's like everyone's back on board. So yeah, like I feel like now their feet have been held to the fire, and it's kind of like make it or break it, and they're gonna make it. They're doing their part now. Ryan's here, Mitch is on board, the MCP is
Mhm.
coming out. So I think they know that like they have to build, but it's just also difficult because it is a bear market, and now you have to scale your team within probably the worst possible time. And if you did it a year ago, maybe it would have been bigger and better results quicker, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of cheap money available,
Yeah.
for them to draw on. If they had sold just like a fraction of their company during the last cycle, they would have been valued at a much higher price. Money's a little harder to come by now, in general. But for sure, they grew super fast, I think, caught fire a bit, and maybe a little complacency set in terms of, like you said, taking the community for granted, because they know they can drop a Lambo drop and it'll sell out instantly. But now they're also seeing that, like, it's not like it was months ago where everything sold out, even the shit, what I
Right.
mean, drops with high edition numbers
Yeah.
were selling out. People are being much more selective, and they're likely feeling that crunch. But
Mhm.
also, to your point about that other project, what's it called? The Kid Called Beast?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I don't know much about, but I've seen and heard a lot. I've seen community members talking about it. We are still Web3, right? I mean, a lot of people here are
Yeah.
Web3 people, and they're looking at what's going on in these other projects, and they're expecting some of those things. And so it's a balancing act, and again speaks to who is Vivi, Web 2, Web 3, Web 2.5. That's fine. Just identify yourself to yourself first, right? Like, come up with that thesis, what we are, because they told us there'd be interoperability
Yeah.
early on, and then it's kind of like, well, not really, and then it's kind of like we still get like these mixed messages. um
Mhm.
and so just clearly define who you are, execute on it, and like you said, they are doing things a bit differently now. They've built out the team, and that gives me a degree of confidence that they'll be able to accomplish what they're setting out to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that clarity is key going forward because I think one thing is that you're gonna like change your entire investment strategy based on what is being said, right? And I
Yeah.
remember back in the day when like they dropped the first white article of like MCP, I think people made an assumption and it felt like it, at least from some of the messaging, that like the MCP was like 3 to 4 months away, even sooner potentially. So people like 2 years ago almost were
Yeah.
like offing their collection, buying secret rares, like doing all these things that were going to give them the most points when, they was still so far away. And even now there might be a continuous evolvement of what that looks like. So I feel like that is like the thing that they forgot is that like as much as you're trying to just appeal to what people want, people are making really important decisions based off what is said. And it's almost better not to say anything and then just come up with a clear kind of statement if you don't have the answer. And like you said, come out with the surprise, like, guess what? Viviverse is here right now. Instead of saying it's 3 months away, it's 4 months away, it's a week away. It's just like, and I think it's easier for them to do. Like, I think they could set those expectations now and totally kind of rechange their course. And I think people would be happy to know that they're saying less and doing more.
Yeah, because we don't need everything right away. It's good to communicate. Like on the one hand, and I struggle with this, right?
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, I want to know, like, when are we getting this? The next drop? And the community kind of, and so I can see to satisfy that, and answer questions, but they should, I guess, sandbag their expectations instead of saying,
Mhm.
anticipate that there's going to be delays. Because it's good also to communicate your long-term vision on what this is going to be, but just
Right.
communicate it. And I don't know if they overestimated themselves and thought that maybe they could, like, because they said master MCP, OUP, Viviverse, interoperability, all this
Mhm.
stuff was going to come in like end of 2021. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, early 2022, whatever it was. And they haven't delivered on any of them. Now, did they kind of overestimate their own capabilities and run into, and get disrupted sidetracked by things that happened that they weren't expecting?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't know, and it's like difficult because you're like, what? Like sometimes I talk to people and they're like, are they just like positioning themselves up for like a sell, or are they really like been bought out by Disney already? And it's just like we're just letting things run and operate
Yeah.
until that happens. And I feel like there's some people with some inside scoops on what's going on, but I think it's just like the wheel that they're already in is like dropping big IP, and like that alone with the social media aspect and getting those licensors on board and working with the devs and maintaining like, just the infrastructure is probably, what's going on. And then like the other 5% is like, okay, Viviverse, but it's like, do we even have time to think about it right now? Because we're continually work with all
Right.
these massive brands. And I think that's kind of, in my opinion, what's happening. And then they're like, shit, like we actually have to get to these things, but there's just so much happening internally that like we don't have the capacity, like you said. And
Right.
um so I'm hoping that's the shift that we're going to see. And I think it's just like, for me, I'd rather a roadmap that said like the beta of like Viviverse is going to be September 2024, and then I'd be like, okay, like I'll look forward to them. But when it comes, like I better see a pretty good beta version at that
Yeah.
point. So I think people would be okay with knowing like there's like a longer time frame in place as long as like we're actually going to meet those deliverables.
Yeah. And I agree with what you said about having to satisfy the licensors and get those drops. And I think it also speaks to them growing too fast in a way
Yeah.
and not scaling out their team maybe early enough, right? So in order to
Mhm.
meet those deadlines, and so they started scaling a little more recently, and now it's going to take some time to see the results of that scaling, right? Because you don't just hire people and then shit gets done. You got to
Right.
onboard them, integrate them into the culture, and go through all those steps. But eventually things will get done. But until they get done, I think we're going to continue to see this sort of sentiment, right? So
Mhm.
it's important to note that if you have that conviction that it's going to get done, you got to get through this sort of thing and kind of like tune out that sentiment, unless, the fundamentals have changed for you.
That's smart. And I think that's it too, is like, and there's some places that I find that are more toxic than others. Like I find like Twitter tends to be a place where a lot of people just, want to talk and share a narrative that may not be, might be completely artificial. Uh, and then there's other places like YouTube where I feel like people are a little more calculated about like the messaging and what's being said. Uh, but I feel like both are important to hear, either side. But like you said, in a bear market, when there's been a lot of kind of negativity, like you're not going to find your courage in here. You know what I'm trying to say? You're going to have to find it somewhere else.
Yeah, 100%. And the people who have the conviction and would, maybe reinforce, your own, they're going to be silent on Twitter because you get, it's now's not the time. You know what I'm saying? Like the, the people who are down on the project have the loudest voices now because now is their time because they have things to say and talk about, and it is what it is.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad too because a lot of people that did well, like I was aware of some people that sold Raid in the hype, like almost everything, like February, like boom, got out with a big chunk. Um, like they're like laughing now, right? They're like, "Oh, I did so well, I did so well." But I guarantee you, as soon as they start to see that move again, they're gonna want back in, right? So it's
Yeah.
like as soon as we see that shift again, and like the larger economic pieces are in place, why like you said, if the fundamentals haven't changed, why wouldn't people know that this is a winning product already, especially with more and IP and better IP with more scarce items now that we're seeing. So yeah, I mean it's good overall, man.
What's funny is that the same people who, like you got like professional trolls and you got people who are always in my feed with talking about Vivi, but they're still talking about Vivi, right? They haven't left. Even people who have legitimate concerns haven't left, right? You have to ask yourself, why is that? I think it's the strength of the community and the strength of the licensing and IP and the product. So, if they do deliver, and I don't consider myself like I try to be like rational and objective and leave the door open to a negative outcome. It's just how my brain is kind of wired. So, I don't know for certain what's going to happen, but I do think that, in time things will play out.
Yeah. And I think it's also smart to like, I guess, have those expectations that you do, so that way you're not disappointed, and also more like just a little more methodical about how you approach everything. Because I think there's other people that are like right now, that I've met that are like, hey, messaging me like, should I put $5,000 on my credit card and go buy like 10 Vaders? And I'm like, dude, like, what are you doing?
Nah.
Yeah, exactly, right. But it's like that's a real thing too, and it's like, okay, wait a second, like, like all those things, family, all that stuff comes first, health, like your financial security, and then it's like this is kind of your fun project. And so I feel like there's a lot of people that also think that this is like 100% gonna go back up. And as much as you and I are both optimistic, I think it's important to keep that level of like, what doesn't happen, and always play devil's advocate, because even for me sometimes I could be stuck in my own shit. Like the whole first appearance thing, I was like, no, this is the first appearance of Spider-Man. And my buddy sat me down, he's like, buddy, the first appearance of Spider-Man was Amazing Fantasy 15. That's where Stan Lee drew it, dude. He's like, this is like, and then he's like, he told me about all that, and then he's like, this is just first on chain. So he's like, first of all, get that through your head that like this may not mean the same, right?
Yeah. And, we're in our own echo chamber too, right? So we're reinforcing our own beliefs. So it's definitely interesting. You have to leave the door open. And it's never a good idea to load up on credit cards. Right? You see the guy who loaded up, I think, $20,000 on Boba Fett
I saw that
a year ago.
And he like left Twitter, and everybody was like commenting. Oh, he was like buying it at like over 200. I think he was like 168 was his last purchase. Yeah.
Yeah, he just loaded up 20K worth of Boba Fett. And he was going to put it on a no interest credit card or something. So it's never a good idea, right? To load up on the credit card.
Yeah.
And that's kind of dangerous with Vivi. So it's so easy to do.
It is. And even for me, I'm not gonna lie, if I'm lazy sometimes, if I'm like out of money for a drop and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to sell this right now, I literally am just like, oh, click $30. But then that conversion rate, man, to Canadian is like 50 plus then the Apple taxes. So like for $30, all of a sudden I'm paying like, 58 or like 60. It's almost like double
So
of
your
what
gems are like 2 to 1.
pretty much actually. Yeah.
You got to
Yes.
flip. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I don't put so that's another huge barrier too, right? Like a lot of people, I mean, the States almost forgets that you guys have the highest currency alongside the pound.
Yeah.
Canada, Australia, India, like I'm not sure what the top geographies are, but even like other places in Europe, like Germany, France, like I'm sure there's that hesitation because even in pounds, like if you look at the like the euro, like a lot of the people that are making money in pounds is a lot lower average salary, I believe, than the States because the pound
Correct.
used to be higher, and then now it's at an evil keel with the States. But so like for them, like if you're paying like a 1-to-1, that's even more money, right?
Yeah. And that's also, not that I pay those extra fees, but just like, the seller fees, where
Mm.
10% to cash out and then whatever it is, 8.5% to Disney. That's what makes me, for investment purposes, lean more towards other assets. Um,
Mm.
you know, because just to make a profit, you gotta be up 30 to 40%.
Exactly. And even then it's like it's even worth your while to pull out
Right.
10%, right? It's like,
Right.
yeah, you're right, because you're doing it, what is it? So it's 8.5% to sell on a
Yeah.
Disney item, let's say, or whatever. And then you're paying 10% to actually go through the cash out.
Yeah. It's
So
18 and a half.
that's it, man. And so that's the other piece, right? Is like, and I've always kind of like, so my collection is a lot smaller, but I'm principled in the fact that like I will, either land something on the drop or buy something low at the opportunity that it could go up, unless there's something that's so glaringly obvious, like that X-Men #1 SR that I'm like, okay, 188, $400, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it's like some things aren't that obvious, and it's like that green Lambo at, I think I was like paid in the 800s. I'm like, yeah, that could be probably 750 or it could be 1.8. I'm like, I don't know what people are gonna get this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just important. Yeah.
Yeah. What's that at now? That
Let me check.
Lambo.
I think it's probably like 9 something. I think it's still in the nines. Let me check. Yeah, 960.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the flip side, this is like, a lot of fun, right? Because
Yeah.
you're playing with IP and they're collectibles also. And so it depends on, what you like and your preference and your goals and all that. But, it's all good.
Exactly. And the biggest flex that I find is just the augmented reality component to the community because everybody gets it. So you're
Yeah.
like, if you're flashing that in AR, it's like, okay, well, this person obviously has it. And that's cool. Like, I don't know, there's something about that within, if like the community was a lot bigger, I feel like it would be amazing to do even more with those things, like setting up these. But the other part too, man, I find it difficult. Like I was at the CN Tower, I was driving to work and I pass it. And I was like, oh, let me get Miles in the green Lambo and I'll friggin' post it. And I like went out of my car and it took me forever to
Yeah.
get the two set up right.
Yeah.
Like it was a whole ordeal. I had to do like 5 times. Like, man, it's not even worth it. Just
You'd
got
be
back
late
in my
for
car
work.
and left. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So it's early technology, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Improved functionality would help a lot and make it, you know, more enjoyable to play with.
exactly. And then in like gaming, you're seeing like, oh, well, my Miles can do 100 backflips and do all these spider web things, and yours just jumps and goes invisible and then turns back to normal. And don't get me wrong, it's cool, but like when you think about like the use case again, when you're explaining that to like a gamer, they like laugh at you, right?
Right.
They're like, oh, okay, you own it, but like, woo woo, you know what I'm saying?
Right. It's all about perspective. Um,
Yeah.
what you're super bullish on Miles, huh?
Yeah, I'm super bullish on like all the, like, to me, like a lot of the, I've got some key ones like Spider-Man, Miles, Marvel Comics #1, AF-15. Like there's so many that I'm like, partner statue, like any of the big stuff. I just feel like, just because I had a big Pokemon collecting history where like it was just the grails that kind of continued to be grails. And at the time I was collecting books. I was like, let me collect the whole base set. Let me collect this whole thing. And then all that time to find these cards, I'm like, man, I could have just been buying Charizards and
Yeah.
stacking that, and then I would have been friggin' wealthy as hell.
Yeah. And I think that's what's likely to happen. If Vivi plays out and does well long term, the grails are going to be the ones, because there's going to be, it's like an ever expanding universe, right? It's going to be a
Mhm.
never ending expanding universe of drops.
Exactly.
That's that's their business, is selling out drops. And there's going to come a day when there are multiple drops a day. So it's a never ending universe of drops. And which
Right.
ones are going to retain value or go up in value? The ones that are the grails that people, their flexes.
Exactly. And that was where the first Unchained thing meant a lot to me because it's a one and done. As like popularity and scarcity, like you can just making more and more miles product that are popular and scarce. But like over time, if you have 1,000 popular scarce miles products, they're gonna look back and be like, okay, how do I distinguish within
Mhm.
that lineup? Oh, that's the first on chain. And so that's kind of how I looked at it. And like the same thing with Pokemon, you're seeing like billions of cards
Yeah.
being like that were printed. And the ones that are still kind of like worth something are those first appearances, but also popular and scarce. So it's hard, man. Like, I mean, we're all just playing this game, but some are better at it than others.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on like how things cut into each other? Like, does Miles cut into the secret rare Spider-Man?
That's interesting. So yeah, I mean, like that's the reason that I kind of the Secret of Spider-Man, just seeing the scarcity right now, I was like, okay, first of all, like let me kind of shift my strategy because there's a lot, there's things that are 1/4 the size, and we've just seen that if there's a good group of people that really believe in a product, then it's hard, those prices could reach bigger levels more quickly, especially if it's popular. And then Spider-Man had like Zombie Spider-Man and Ben Riley and all these other ones, and Miles is kind of like obviously a part of that Spider-Man franchise, but I figured the way I interpret it is like almost like the next gen Spider-Man. And so I was like, okay, this kind of seems new, as a lot of these other things are appealing, in my opinion, to like an older generation. And I'm looking at this like in 5 to 6 years
Yeah.
when like Miles movies are going to be out, and like that's kind of how I'm seeing this. It's a long-term thing for me, as I don't know if we're going to see like people are going to give a shit about like AF-15 in 10 years that are like it's all these new guys saying like, oh, this matters because the old people thinks it matters, or like because it's a high comic book in real life. Again, I'm not wording this perfectly. I'm just saying that I think that we're going to see a shift in culture, and
Mhm.
comic books that like meant the world right now may not mean the world in 10 years from now in crypto. um and so like I'm just trying to play all bases, and that's why I'm like, these collectibles, my biggest hope is that there's like an avatar component to it, or even a skin, or even if it spawns the skin and like Disney's metaverse, and like you can only have one of 250 because like you have to have the miles, as an example. Like that's my hope, like
Yeah.
of where we could see some crazy price points.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. Or unlocking key things in the Vivi verse. Um,
Mhm.
because then you've got things like, the other thing is like, in Fortnite, they already have a lot of these skins,
I know.
right?
Yeah.
So, but it's the blockchain thing. So it's a matter of what people attach value to, and how they perceive these things in the future.
And that's where it comes back to community, because I keep saying to people, like, if you want to see mainstream adoption, you have to have people literally that you run into that are like, oh yeah, first appearance, and they get it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the likelihood of that is so damn low that like there's going to be a mass understanding of like all these different collector terminologies. It may always be niche, but it may just be a bigger niche.
Yeah. And that's key also, because I was
Right.
thinking about baseball cards again. I looked up, so baseball cards have been collected for like over a century, right?
Yeah.
Originally, they came in cigarette packs, little baseball cards, and they were given away and things like that. Eventually, like tops came out, but there are like, however, tens of millions of baseball fans, 50 million, whatever it is. Less than 1 million people actually collect baseball cards.
Wow.
That's enough to sustain the industry, not only to propel, you know, those grail cards to millions of dollars in value, but also to sustain the endless drop of cards that are, being dropped now.
Wow.
So you don't need 100 million people. It'd be nice,
Yeah.
but if you had like a million dedicated collectors,
Ooh.
yeah,
That's amazing. What a great thing to bring up, because that's where I was thinking, was like, I keep thinking 50 million, that we need that, right? But when I look at some of these people in this app, I'm like, they've been hitting drop after drop. Like every week they're looking for special mints on something, like they're just getting a piece of it. And they've got so much money that like they're
Yeah.
just keep running it through. So it's like you said, if you have 1 million people and these drops
Yeah.
are going, like there's 3,000 editions of something,
Yeah.
right? Like it's enough where somebody gets their paycheck every week and they're spending money on that.
Yeah. Like there's nobody here basically. Like 3,000 people. That's
Yeah,
like a speck of dust, right, in the collector's
it is.
universe. And they're propping up the market. They're still generating $1 million a week in a
Mhm.
tough financial, atmosphere. To go from 3,000 to 1 million dedicated users is exponential growth.
Exactly. Wow.
So, to talk about tens of millions of people is great, but it's not even necessary.
So this is interesting, and that's where maybe going too broad with this marketing strategy to get in the normies is
Correct.
like definitely the wrong move, because like they will never be here potentially.
Correct.
And like you said, like coming after guys like you and me now, how do we get into these guys, these Star Wars guys that are like into collectibles? They've got money, they're investors, they're into crypto. Maybe that's the target demographic. And like, how do we just ensure that like we get more people like them in
Yeah.
and focus in on this little community? Man, like one thing I keep saying is like I'm a project manager at a hospital in Toronto, one of the best children's hospitals,
Oh,
and I learned from some of the best people. And the biggest thing that I'm so not understanding is like interviewing everybody, like not like as a formal qualitative one-to-one sit down, like a 300, you know, uh, word kind of scantron where it's like, who are you? What do you like? What are your interests? If we did this, what would you think? Please comment on that. And doing this huge kind of survey to all the most loyal fan base, and then extrapolating all those results and being like, okay, here's our demographic. Here's exactly what they like. And then you're like, okay, let's take that information and search for more people like
it's
that.
interesting.
That would be my play, at least,
You should bring that to the advisory board.
Yeah, I don't even think I sit on that. I was like invited way back in the day. I think I missed a deadline or something, but
That's interesting because the community is so tuned in that you'd get the responses. They would gladly fill out the information.
they would they would spend their whole Sunday 4 hours,
Right.
because they have so much investment into this and belief that like this is critical. And then you'd be able to literally, they could do a thematic analysis on all the verbal stuff, all the written information, find the trends. Then you can do a quantitative analysis and look at like the demographic, the age, the interest.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all Star Wars collectors in here. Oh, actually, you know what, that's why Winnie the Pooh didn't sell it. Nobody gives a shit. Or
Yeah.
like, and then you'd be able to say like, okay, and then on top of that, be able to shift your drop strategy to potentially feed into what those consumers like, and then they would tell more friends, and then everybody be making more money because it'd be appealing to the people that are already in here, right?
Yeah. I
So
think that's a great idea.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I'll just clip this and we'll just post it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Because even
Man.
like, Vivi Viral he posts like surveys sometimes, and one of them was like, how did you get into Vivi, the app? And
Mhm.
70% of people said through crypto, through OMI. 30% said, they didn't get in through OMI.
Right.
Even little bits of data like that will help you, figure out how you got here and then how to, like you said, broaden that pie, get
Yeah.
more like, similar people in.
Exactly. I don't know. I never really thought about it like that. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it just hit it like a new, like it like opened up a new neuron for me. I was like, oh, wait a second. You're right. Like, wait a second. Like, because there's probably a lot more people like us that would be easier to onboard than it would be to like do through this huge education strategy.
Right.
And I think like the way that like people mostly get into this stuff, it's like friend to friend. It's like peer to peer. Like I told my friends they were into it, they told their friends. Oh, my
Yeah.
friend has a YouTube channel, and then it just kind of goes like that. And it's like this word of mouth thing. So like understanding your user base first, I think, is what's so important, right? So yeah, man, really cool conversation. I'm actually, it's one of my favorite conversations I've had. It's
Oh,
been
thanks,
pretty
man.
sick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I've enjoyed it. We're dressed similar too.
Dude, we weren't lying when we said we're fucking twins in this, When you came on with that, I was like, all right, man, this is gonna be a good one. Yeah. Well, listen, buddy, thank you so much, for coming on. If you guys do not follow Danny DeBull, make sure to go follow him. His channel and Twitter and everything is going to be in the description below. Obviously, super intelligent guy, really knows his stuff. And yeah, man, I feel like it'd be amazing to got you back on like a group chat with a lot of the guys and just throw ideas off each other and, you know, play devil's advocate on a lot of these different situations. So
yeah, I love conversations like these, and thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
me too, man. Yeah, we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, take care, boss. Thank you.
Take care, man.